Every time a terrorist murders an innocent person and falsely invokes the name of God, it should be an insult to every person of faith. Terrorists do not worship God, they worship death. If we do not act against this organized terror, then we know what will happen and what will be the end result.
So back in May of 2017, President Trump spoke at a meeting in Saudi Arabia. It was actually his first foreign trip as president of the United States in his first term. And he went to Saudi Arabia and he spoke to a summit meeting, a gathering of over 50 Islamic nations. It was a meeting called the Arab Islamic American Summit, and it took place in Saudi Arabia. And he gave a remarkable speech there. I want to play you an excerpt from the speech where he really puts in front of the Muslim world, in front of the Arab world, the choice that they have to make about whether they want to be part of the peace and prosperity of the peaceful family of nations in the world, or they want to continue to embrace and support terrorism. And he starts out this part of the speech talking about how young the population in the Middle East actually is. But it's an amazing clip, and I want to talk about it for a few minutes after we watch it. So have a look.
65% of its population is under the age of 30. Like all young men and women, they seek great futures to build, great national projects to join, and a place for their families to call home. But this untapped potential, this tremendous cause of optimism, is held at bay by bloodshed and terror. There can be no coexistence with this violence. There can be no tolerating it, no accepting it, no excusing it, and no ignoring it. Every time a terrorist murders an innocent person and falsely invokes the name of God, it should be an insult to every person of faith. Terrorists do not worship God, they worship death. If we do not act against this organized terror, then we know what will happen and what will be the end result. Terrorism's devastation of life will continue to spread. Peaceful societies will become engulfed by violence, and the futures of many generations will be sadly squandered. If we do not stand in uniform condemnation of this killing, then not only will we be judged by our people, not only will we be judged by history, but we will be judged by God. This is not a battle between different faiths, different sects, or different civilizations. This is a battle between barbaric criminals who seek to obliterate human life and decent people, all in the name of religion. People that want to protect life and want to protect their religion. This is a battle between good and evil. When we see the scenes of destruction in the wake of terror, we see no signs that those murdered were Jewish or Christian, Shia or Sunni. When we look upon the strains of innocent blood soaked into the ancient ground, we cannot see the faith or sect or tribe of the victims. We see only that they were children of God whose deaths are an insult to all that is holy. But we can only overcome this evil if the forces of good are united and strong, and if everyone in this room does their fair share and fulfills their part of the burden. Terrorism has spread all across the world, but the path to peace begins right here on this ancient soil in this sacred land. America is prepared to stand with you in pursuit of shared interests and common security. But the nations of the Middle East cannot wait for American power to crush this enemy for them. The nations of the Middle East will have to decide what kind of future they want for themselves, for their country, and frankly, for their families and for their children. It's a choice between two futures, and it is a choice America cannot make for you. A better future is only possible if your nations drive out the terrorists and drive out the extremists. Drive them out. Drive them out of your places of worship. Drive them out of your communities. Drive them out of your holy land. And drive them out of this earth.
There you go. Drive them out. So there's President Trump. Again, this is 2017. It's almost 9 years ago, telling the Muslim world, hey, it's time to make a civilizational decision. Which side are you on? And do you want to have a better, more peaceful future with the rest of the world? Or do you want to embrace all of this Islamism and this terrorism? And I think the best, most powerful part of the speech is where he says, listen, this is not a choice that America can make for you. You need to make a choice yourself about what direction you want to go in. And we've seen that since that time, during Trump's first term, we had the Abraham Accords, where the United Arab Emirates and Morocco and Bahrain and Sudan got involved, were signing agreements, normalization agreements with Israel that have sustained themselves even through the war that Israel has fought. Countries that have outlawed the Muslim Brotherhood and that have really been pushing back against the terrorism. And then you see other countries like Turkey and Qatar who continue to fund the terrorism. They continue to back it. They back countries that, that are engaging in the terrorist activity. And look, let's be very frank here. The real reason I wanted to show you this video is because we have a problem right now in the current Trump administration. And let me say, President Trump has been the best president for Israel ever. However, there is a blind spot. It's a very serious blind spot, and that is this kind of wishful thinking, looking at countries like Qatar and Turkey as allies, looking at them as moderates, believing that they are not supporting terrorism because Turkey's a NATO ally and they're kind of friendly to America and they have a history of being a more Western style democracy before Erdogan. And Qatar puts a lot of money into its image and hosts Formula One races and hosts, the World Cup and it has a nice airline and at the same time, they fund all this anti-American and anti-Jewish hate all over the world, pouring in billions of dollars into American college campuses. So when America, in its approach to the Middle East, sees Qatar and Turkey as moderates who could hold back or fight against the terrorists, they're fooling themselves. And that's why we see like what's happening in Syria right now, where this former al-Qaeda ISIS guy, al-Shara, who's now the nominal president of Syria. I don't know why anyone calls him that. He's not he wasn't elected by anyone. He was just the first terrorist into the palace after the Assad regime fell. So because he crossed the finish line first, I guess he gets to be called the leader. But America is propping him up because Turkey is propping him up. And the minorities in Syria, like the Alawites and the Christians, the Maronite Christians and the Druze and the Kurds, are all not having any of it, and they don't want to submit to this jihadist regime. Here you have the Americans kind of hoping or wanting to believe that these jihadist terrorists can be incentivized with economic incentives and the like to not be jihadists anymore. And that just never works. That is a mistake that Westerners have been making in the Middle East for a long, long time, believing that economic incentives and worldly incentives like that would work on Westerners would work on the ideologues in the Middle East. Here's an interesting data point that makes that point really powerfully. There's been polling done of the Palestinians, the Arabs in Gaza and in Judea and Samaria, what's known as the West Bank. And I'm talking polling done by Palestinian polling agency, very reliable. And they've been doing polling from the beginning of the October 7th war every couple of months. And one of the questions that they have been asking in the last few polls, asking the population of Gaza, they ask them, are you in favor of ending the war by Hamas laying down its weapons? Meaning the question is, are you in favor of Hamas laying down its weapons, disarming, if it will mean that there's no more war with Israel? Very simple question, right? Do you want the war to end and have Hamas lay down its weapons? Because we're always told that, oh, the people of Gaza just want a better life for themselves. They don't really want Hamas. They don't really want, they of course are suffering, and they're being displaced, and their homes are being destroyed, and they're living in terrible conditions. You'd think the answer would be obvious. You'd think it would be like 100% of them would say, of course, we want Hamas to lay down their weapons and end the war. Well, lo and behold, more than 70% of the population of Gaza said no, they do not want Hamas to lay down their weapons, even if it means the end of the war. You see, and that's incomprehensible to Westerners, but what it's really coming from is this problem that ideology, this jihadist ideology, runs so deep in this part of the world that it's actually more important to these people than their own economic well-being. So President Trump is very well-meaning, and I love the way he was very forceful in that speech, just basically saying, drive them out. You have to make a decision. Do you want to be part of the family of peaceful nations? If you do, you have to drop all this jihadist stuff. You have to root it out of your societies. I can't say that the Muslim world on a whole or even majority has done this. They haven't made the right choice for the most part since that speech President Trump gave. But it's so important for Western leaders to not be fooled into thinking that countries in the Middle East that act like moderates are actually moderates. You got to take a look at their actual behavior and look at what they say to their own populations in Arabic. So again, for all the moral clarity President Trump showed, I'm hoping that his administration gets some clarity, some real moral clarity about the Turks and the Qataris who are actually fomenting chaos and supporting Islamic terrorism all over the world, not fighting against it.